So, a common argument for justifying Putin's invasion or for pushing for immediate peace is the dreaded NATO expansion, the idea that Ukraine's military collaboration with the West provoked Russia. Well, I don't believe this was the only cause, the main cause, or in any way a justifiable one. The reasoning still falls apart from the Ukrainian perspective, even if we take it as face value. Now, the way to think about it, and the way Ukrainians were likely thinking about it around 2014 or before 2014, is along two axes. One is the risk of a Russian invasion, and the second one is the actual chances of survival from a Russian invasion. So let's look at the ideal scenario. The ideal scenario is that you have a minimal risk for a Russian invasion and a high chance of survival. The option for this is that Ukraine would have remained a democratic, politically independent nation within NATO. So obviously this would have meant that the risk of invasion would be low because it would be protected by Article 5 and the nuclear umbrella. And obviously, in case of invasion, it would have a very high chance of survival. Now, the other option is that Ukraine would have basically given up its political independence from Russia, gradually becoming like Belarus, and losing its status as a democratic free nation. What this would have meant is obviously low chances of survival from an invasion because it wouldn't have its own independent army or structure, but obviously very low risk of being invaded because it would be, for all intents and purposes, a vassal state of Russia. Now, we know that Ukrainians do not like this option. In 2014, when the government started siding with Russia, despite the promises that it had made during the electoral campaign, a revolution started. So Ukrainians have absolutely no desire to become a vassal state to Russia. Whether you believe US had any involvement in that doesn't matter much, because the Ukrainians did not fight with the military. They did not receive weapons. They literally fought with their hands, sticks, and Molotov cocktails not to join Russia. So as you can see, option number 2, also not possible. So what is the other option? Ukraine remains a democratically free, politically independent state, but with no military support from the West. Sort of politically independent and militarily neutral, or politically siding with the European Union and militarily neutral. But what that does is that it increases the risk of a Russian invasion. We've seen that as a result of the protests against the government in 2014, Russia invaded Crimea and the eastern regions of Ukraine. So there is tangible evidence that suggests that Russia does not admit a Ukraine that is politically close to the West, even though it does not have its own, it doesn't have a strong military support from the West. So what is this situation? This is a situation that has a high risk of being invaded and zero chances of survival. So when people ask Ukraine to be neutral, what they're asking is either the option of it being a vassal state like Belarus, so a non-democratic state, or a state that is free, which has a high risk of being invaded again and again, and no chances of survival. Let me remind you that Ukraine is a flat country. It's not like Switzerland. It's not protected by mountains or geography. So what is the remaining logical option for Ukraine? To stay a democratically free and politically independent nation and seek military support from the West, even if outside of NATO. And what does that bring? It does bring a higher risk of being invaded because obviously Russia could see it as a threat. It could want to increase the speed at which it attacks it so it doesn't become too fortified. It doesn't take too many defenses. It doesn't have too much military power. So it does speed up the clock of an invasion, but at the same time, it offers higher chances of survival. So between a high risk of being invaded and zero chance of defending yourself, and an even higher risk of being invaded, but much higher chances of survival, what would you choose? This is why, in my opinion, it was perfectly rational for Ukraine to side with the West if it wanted to remain a politically independent and democratic nation.